submitted for your approval. Imagine that you have the good sense to be in Ireland. Now, perhaps it's in one of the major cities. Perhaps in Dublin or in Cork or Derry. Or perhaps you're in one of the many beautiful little villages that dot the countryside. In fact, let us imagine that it is 100 years ago, and you and your family are in a small cottage by the edge of a moor in the middle of winter. Oh, you can hear the cold wind blowing outside, but you're warm as you move a little closer to the peat fire. And the smell of a pipe smoke circles the air. And you talk about the things of the day that happened. Suddenly, there is something else in the wind. Suddenly you hear the sound of a woman screaming, crying, lamenting, wailing as though her heart is about to break. And everyone in the family sits and stares. Well, there is no question what you have just heard. You have just heard the most terrifying denizen of the other world. You have just heard the Banshee. Now, there's only one question. She is wailing in the night. Who is she wailing for? Well, perhaps it is one of your relatives across the sea in America. Perhaps that cousin in Boston. Or maybe in another city in Ireland, down in the village. Perhaps you have a few relatives there. Or perhaps, just perhaps, it would be someone sitting in the circle by the peat fire. Or she might be calling for you. Hello, my name is Stephen J. Rolfes, and I am here today in this beautiful Garden of the Dead, Spring Grove Cemetery in Cincinnati. And I'm talking about my new book, Beware the Banshee's Cry, the folklore and history of messengers of death. And that is due to come out, I believe, right in the beginning of September of 2024. I was on what they call Llewellyn Con. Apparently, some of the people at Llewellyn Publishing had a 3 margarita lunch, and they decided, hey, let's invite that old man from Ohio. And I will provide a link to that talk. It's a half-hour talk about the book and different stories about banshees. I'll put that down below. But for now, let's not waste any more time. Let's talk about banshees. The Banshee is actually a goddess, an ancient Celtic goddess, part of that very rich faith that the ancestors worshipped before the coming of St. Patrick and Christianity. And the old goddesses, well, they didn't want to leave Ireland. Who can blame them? And a lot of the banshees that are connected to certain families, banshees are always connected to one family, have the same exact name and attributes of certain goddesses. For example, the Fitzgerald family is connected to the goddess Aine. Now, Aine was the goddess of summer, of fertility, of the sun, the crops coming up, the livestock giving birth, and the people too. And besides that, we have Cleona. Cleona was a very interesting goddess, and I'm going to tell you, I have an incredible story about her in the book, and you'll love the story. There's also the goddess Aviel, who was the harp player. Now, she was connected to the O'Brien family, and you find mention of her in County Clare. There's also the goddess Clotha, and one more goddess. I bet you know who I'm talking about. That would be the goddess Morrigan. Or should I say, the Morrigan? Because Morrigan, that dark death goddess of battle and slaughter, was actually three separate goddesses who, like Hecate in Greece, would be combined together into one terrible deity. The three goddesses were Naaman, who loved to cause panic on the battlefield, to cause brave warriors to drop their weapons, turn around, and run off when they would usually get an arrow in the back. She was also Makkah. Makkah was the great battle crow circling over the field, knowing lunch was soon to be served. And most importantly for the Banshee, she was also the goddess Bound, B-A-D-B, Bound, who was also a death and battle goddess. Whether she's a ghost, a fairy queen, or a goddess, someone in the family that she is connected to is going to die. There are two ways that she can deliver that message. The first way is the one that everyone has heard of, the wailing and screeching in the night. But there's another way. Sometimes people will come across a young or old woman standing in a stream up to her knees in the water, washing clothes, and the clothes are filled with blood, and the water about is turning scarlet. Whoever clothes those are, that is the person who is going to die. This goes back to the time of the great warrior Cormac Conlingus, and he was the son of Conchobar MacLesit, and he was going to be crowned the King of Ulster. And he was with his men, a group of fighting men, and they were on their way to be crowned, for him to be crowned the king. Well, they came to a place called Druim Uther. And as they crossed the stream, they saw a woman in the water up to her knees, washing a chariot and the harnesses. And there was blood on the chariot and the harnesses, and gore, and the water was turning crimson beneath them. And the men, as they looked at that, and they said, this is not good. Well, they were on their way to Choka Hostel, but they stopped to rest. Cormac called his messenger forward, and he said, go back, find out what was she doing. And he did so, because he wanted to impress the future king. And he came back, and he was too frightened, his jaw open. He couldn't even speak. So then Cormac said what every man and woman says at least once in their life. If you want something done right, you gotta do it yourself. So he got up and he went back to the stream, and there she was, still out in the water, washing away. And he says, "What are you doing? What are you washing there? And whose chariot is that? And whose harnesses are those?" And she looks up, and with an evil grin, she says, "Why, they're yours, and those of your men."
Sad will they be in the hostel. Bodies will be severed in bloods. Trunks will be headless above the clay of T'Choka's hostel.
And that is exactly what happened. They were attacked when they were staying at the hostel, and there were few, if any, survivors. The Banshee always knows. But what does a Banshee actually sound like? Well, there's a wide variety. Sometimes it's a beautiful singing, and other times it's a horrific screeching, wailing like nails on a chalkboard. In fact, a lot of people say it sounds like a screeching cat. And that's what happened with Anne back in 1983 in Dublin. She was sitting in her kitchen in the night, just a regular evening, and all of a sudden she hears this horrible screeching cat sound from outside. And she said, "Now what is there a cat rooting through my garbage cans out there?" So she gets up and she walks to the window, and as she walks, she starts to think. And she had heard the Banshee once before, years earlier, and all of a sudden she's thinking, what if that's not a cat? And she looks out, and there is a small woman with long hair, combing her hair, and screeching and wailing. No, she was not going through the garbage. Banshees hardly ever do that. And Anne goes back into the kitchen like, "Oh my God, I just saw the Banshee. Someone's going to die." And at about that point, her mother walks into the kitchen. She said, "What's going on? Can't you hear that? Can't you hear that out there, that wailing? Well, it stopped now, but I could hear it. It was wet. Surely you must have heard." "What are you talking about?" "No, I haven't heard anything. Is it a little early to be hitting the sauce there, Anne?" Well, nothing to be done. Sometimes only one or two people can hear a Banshee, and that's what happened in this case. However, her mother thought different of it the next day. For when Anne was walking down the sidewalk coming home from work, here's her mother, tears in her eye, running out towards her. Apparently, a favorite aunt had just died unexpectedly. Well, the Banshee always knows. There's another tale of a woman who heard a screeching and horrible sound like someone was in pain or sick or wounded. This was a rather wealthy Irish woman, and she heard this sound one night as she was sitting in her study reading, and someone outside, is someone hurt? So she calls the servants together, and she says, "Go on out there, see what the heck that is. Someone might need our help." And the servants, they knew darn well what the heck was out there. And they look at each other like, am I getting paid well enough to do this? Well, apparently she did pay pretty well, because they all went out and they took lanterns. And, hello, anybody out here? Anyone need help? No. They came back in. No one was out there. Okay, well, it stopped anyway. And she read for a while and went up to bed. Next morning, the servants were up bright and early. The men were eating their breakfast, getting ready to go out and do their work. And the women were making breakfast. But the lady of the house had not come down yet. So they found the youngest and newest maid. They said, go on up and see what's going on up there. Maybe she needs help dressing or something. Well, she went up and she came down real quick with a pale look on her face. And she said she won't be down for breakfast today. The lady had died during the night. And she always knows. Now, one thing about the Banshee is they like to ride in style. And their method of transportation sometimes is a thing known as the coach a bower. Now, the Banshee rides in it. The person driving the coach a bower has no head. He is what they call a doulaha. Well, if you see the coach at night, if you're walking down a road in Ireland and you see and you hear the coach coming up behind you, don't look at it. Fall down on the ground, hide your eyes, do not look at the coach a bower, because the Banshee riding inside may throw a bucket of blood on top of you. Or the coach may stop, the door open, and she picks up an unscheduled passenger. In fact, if you're ever in Central Europe, in Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Bohemia, there is something called the Wild Hunt. They also know of this in England and probably in Ireland too. And it is a parade across the sky of damned souls screaming in torment, and the baying of hellhounds with their red eyes, and all being led by Wotan. Or, now if you would happen to be out on a stormy night of the side of Dusseldorf and you suddenly hear this coming, get down on the ground, cover your eyes, or else they will sweep you along with them. If you're ever in Hawaii, walking along a beach on a romantic night, and you hear the chanting and the drums of that phenomenon known as the Night Marchers, ancient kings and great warriors from centuries ago, their ghosts walking by torchlight. If they come up, get down on the ground, cover your eyes, otherwise they will spear you. As much as I love the Banshees of Ireland, the name of the book is, of course, The Folklore and History of Messengers of Death. So sadly, we must now leave the Emerald Isle, and we'll head just across the Irish Sea to Scotland. Now, there are two basic types of death messenger in Scotland. One is the Beinn Niggy, which is, very much like the washerwoman type of Banshee. The other is the Cainitish. The Cainitish is almost exactly like the Irish Banshee, wailing out at night to predict the death. On the Isle of Skye, in the Inner Hebrides, in the seminal year of 1776, a group of young people, some from the Rossmartin family, had gone to an entertainment, a dance or a concert or something, and they were all in a wagon coming back that night. And of course, like young people, they're laughing and joking and kidding with each other, and they go by the ruins of the church known as Kilchrist. Now, Kilchrist is a beautiful old but ruined church. In fact, there is no roof on the church, as happens so often in the British Isles with the real old churches. You know, C.S. Lewis once said that every church should not have a roof. And I can kind of see his point. I may disagree with it come February, but I can understand what he's saying. Well, they were going by the ruins of Kilchrist, and suddenly they hear this woman wailing and screaming in the ruins. And the women in the wagon were, "Oh my!" And the men say, "Oh, stop the wagon." Well, the horse did not want to stop. The horse wanted to put a little bit more of Scotland between him and that ruins. But he stopped. The men said, "We'll take care of this. We got this." Oh, my hero. This was in the days before Xena. Well, the men go up to the ruins, and they can still hear her wailing inside. They say, "I'll tell you what, there's so many different ways to get in and out. I'll tell you what, we'll split up, and we'll come in a different way, and that way we'll find out who's doing this." And that's exactly what they did. And they came in all at the same time, and guess what? The only thing they saw was themselves. Oh, that's interesting. And they go back to the wagon. By now the wailing had stopped, and the women were there. "Oh, we were so frightened." "It's all right. We took care of it." Of course, they had no idea what the heck had happened, but they had to look brave. Well, they dropped the various people off at their homes, and then the last ones, the members of the Rossmartin family, they go home, and they hear the mother come out. They say, "Oh my God, thank God you're back now, because you know your father's away in Ireland on business. And wouldn't you know, while you were gone, a raven came down and stopped on the windowsill, and he tapped 3 times. And I swear by all of the saints, that raven had glowing red eyes." The very next day, they learned that the father had died while on his trip to Ireland. Nevermore. Now the Gurak means the maid of the dribble. The dribble in this case would be fog, light rain, mist, and believe me, you would not want to be walking on a misty night and her come out of the fog towards you. She is also said to have large bat wings. If you've ever seen Max Ernst's Un Semaine de Bonte, you have the women with the bat wings behind them. That's pretty much what she is, add in a very ugly face. Now, her thing was to fly about in the night air, in the fog and the drizzle, and she would come up to the window of a room where a person is dying, and those great wings of hers would flap around and pound against the glass in the window. And then the person was not long for this earth. Now we move down to my part of the neighborhood in Deutschland, in the German-speaking lands. And here we find a death messenger known as Die Weiße Frau, the White Lady. Well, there are stories of the Weiße Frau in Switzerland, the whole area, but we will concentrate on the top dogs, the top family, and that would be the Hohenzollerns. Now, the Hohenzollerns were a royal family that started achieving their rulership in the 11th century, and they went all the way up to 1918 with the last of the Hohenzollern rulers, Kaiser Wilhelm II. He had a little problem with a war, but his family, the Hohenzollern family, also had their own Weiße Frau. And one time at the Castle Neuhaus, one of the Hohenzollern princesses was standing in a hallway in front of a mirror trying on a hat. And out of the corner of her eye, she saw someone was walking behind her, and she just figured it was a maid. So she asked, "What time is it?" And she got a ghostly answer, "10 Uhr ist es, ihr Lieben." It is 10 o'clock, your love. And she turned around, and with an evil grin, there was the Hohenzollern Weiße Frau looking at her. That princess died a few days later. The Weiße Frauen always know. Now, one thing that you never, ever want to see is yourself. To see the doppelganger, which is your exact double, is a certain sign that you're going to die very soon. If you are ever in Cambridge, England, and you get a chance to go to the Fitzwilliam Museum, you will see a painting by Rossetti, and it's called How They Met Themselves. It shows a young man and a young woman out for a little stroll in the forest, maybe a little stolen kiss, young love, but they suddenly stop and they're terrified because right in front of them is the exact same young man, young woman with sad looks on their faces and a strange, eerie glow about them. The woman is fainting dead away. The young man has pulled his sword out, but it won't do any good. When you see yourself, you're destined to die very soon. You can find images of that painting online with no problem. And a lot of people, famous people, have seen their own doppelgangers before their death. Abraham Lincoln, I talk a great deal about him in the book. Johann von Goethe, and of course the most famous of all, Percy Shelley. His doppelganger did not only just appear to him, it actually spoke to him and said, "How long do you expect to be contented?" Within a month, on July 8th, Percy Shelley, the great poet, died of drowning in the Gulf of La Spezia. As our friends from the Fritz family would say, Die Zeit ist nicht unser Freund. Time is not our friend. There are so many more stories, so many things that I would love to tell you about, but I'm afraid we have just literally ran out of time. First of all, I certainly hope that you enjoyed the different views of Spring Grove Cemetery. Believe me, if you are ever in Cincinnati and you want an interesting afternoon, especially in the spring, come on now. It's real close to downtown. You can get a map at the office at the opening, and believe me, you will love it. Now, I want to remind you once again that the book is Beware the Banshee's Cry, the folklore and history of messengers of death. And it is released by Llewellyn, and that should be early September 2024. Now, there are other stories that I have on YouTube that were from the Llewellyn Con. I'm such a pussycat. I'm going to give you a link to it right below in the description.
Let's get going. You're cutting in my drinking time.
Well, thank you very much for putting up with me as I wandered around this beautiful Garden of the Dead. And I hope everyone enjoys the book and has pleasant dreams tonight. Be seeing you.